All right. It's 2:02, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Might be a few people that just joined, so welcome everybody. This is the Empire Builders webinar series. This is actually the second webinar in this series. We did our first one back in May and had a really nice group and great conversation. So we're excited to be doing this again. We've got some new panelists this time and a lot of new attendees. So I mentioned this in the early moments of the call, but for everybody who didn't hear it, we'll send out the recording after a few days after this webinar. So if you do have to miss, or if you join later, have to leave early, just know that we will send that out to you. If questions come up, go ahead and answer them or ask them in the Q&A section, and we will touch on them as often as we can throughout the call. Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with ApplePie, just wanted to do a quick overview of who we are. ApplePie, we've been lending to franchise brands since 2015. So since that time, we funded over 2.7 billion in loans across over 200 franchise brands. We only do franchise financing, so our whole business model is centered around understanding your brand, helping you find the financing options that meet your needs throughout all stages of your growth. We can help in a number of ways, either through our conventional loan option. We also have an SBA lender network, and we also have equipment-specific loans and refresh remodel options. So our main goal is just to understand what you need, work with you to figure out the best financing solution for your specific project at that time. All right, enough about ApplePie. I'm going to introduce myself and then the other folks we have on the call. My name's Samantha Holt. I have been with ApplePie since 2017. I manage our sales operations and our relationship manager group. So been here for almost 8 years now and loved every minute of it. We also have Randy Jones on the call. Randy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. Appreciate the attendance, and also really excited for everybody to learn some nuggets from Art and Charles. I'm Randy Jones. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at ApplePie Capital. I also joined in 2017 by way of a merger of my company that was formed in 2000 and joined forces with ApplePie Capital in 2017. So been focused on franchise lending for, hard to believe, 25 years almost. So makes me feel old when I say that, hence the reason for the pause. But thanks for joining. Just a plug for Sam. Lucky to have her. She's amazing.
Thanks, Randy. All right, so these are our Empire Builders. They're the stars of the show today. We've got Art Wrightson. He's a Club Pilates franchisee. We've worked with Art on a few different loans, so he's a valued customer of ours. Same can be said about Charles D'Amico. We're also very familiar with him and his Jimmy John's empire. I'll let the two of you say a few words about yourself, and then we can get started. Art, you can go ahead and start with a quick intro if you'd like.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Randy. Art Wrightson, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been with the Club Pilates franchise a little over 3 years. Excited to be here, share what we can with anyone that's in the franchising space or looking to get in the franchising space. And big thank you to Randy and Sam and the ApplePie team. I think it's important to put these types of webinars on, and also thank you for all of your support over the years.
Absolutely. Thanks, Art. Charles, you are up.
Hey guys, I'm originally from Detroit. In Amarillo right now. I've got locations in Lubbock, El Paso, and Santa Fe. 11 units. I've done most of my growth through acquiring markets that were kind of dilapidated and rebuilding them and regrowing them. Everything from refreshes to restaffing them from the ground up. We grew pretty fast, pretty quick, 0 to 7 in 22 months, and still kind of growing from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Charles. So I'm going to start with you, sort of on the topic of what you just mentioned. So you've got 11 units now. And as you said, you've acquired and turned around a lot of those stores. And I think there can be a tendency to view acquisitions like that a little more opportunistically when they come up. And some people may not realize, at least at the beginning, I think they realize eventually some of the hidden costs. For you obviously have a strong operational background, which is why I'm sure you leverage that strategy to begin with. But what was your main focus and the most important thing you learned from buying the underperforming locations?
There's always a cost. It's just how are you going to spend the money, right? Over the years, I've kind of learned whether you're building brand new or buying used, you're going to spend the money, whether it's, year one when you're building it, or it's over, a couple of months or a couple of years when you're, fixing it up, or, just over time, right? So I've almost kind of learned like it's almost the same cost. It's just a matter of how you're going to spend it. So like if you're building a new store, anywhere from 400 to 600,000, depending on the size for what I do, I may acquire a store for much less, but I'm going to end up spending that same amount of money in some fashion. It's just a matter of how. Is it getting customers back in marketing? Is it staffing? Is it fixing? Is it replacing? Like the cost is always there. It's just a matter of how and where. Now, someone like me, who son of two teachers, didn't grow up, a lot of the markets I take over, I buy it from a doctor or I buy it from a lawyer. Like I'm buying it from somebody who bought it as an investment. They didn't understand maybe the work that it takes. And so to me, it was an opportunity because I didn't always have this like huge nest egg to start with. So to me, it was just always like constantly reinvesting back into the company. And, the founder of your company, Denise, believed in me when a lot of other people didn't, and saw my numbers and talked to me and your underwriting department and was like, oh, he knows what he's doing. And they put a lot of faith in me to kind of be a little crazier than maybe most people. And same with the Jimmy John's brand, knowing that I started way back in the day as a GM when there was only a couple hundred stores. And I've been able to kind of do, and it's been hard, don't get me wrong, but I've got 11 stores to show for it and 200 plus employees, and we're still growing.
Yeah, awesome. I have a follow-up question on just one of the elements of hidden costs, and that's like the employee aspect of it. When you've got units where it was run by someone who's not, they're not in fast food, they're not in the restaurant business, they may be sort of absentee operators. How do you typically, and maybe it's unit by unit, but you do typically keep some of the staff on and just try to get them, like take them under your wing and change the mentality in the store? Or do you just start from scratch? Like, how do you know how to focus that energy?
So my Amarillo market, I still have like 4 or 5 managers that were originally here, like in some fashion from 7, 8 years ago.
Okay.
Every market has a good portion of the people that were still there when we took it over. But some might have just been the drivers, some were managers. The one thing I have noticed is every market we took over, most of the time, employees were being overpaid, especially the more absentee the owner or the operator. Because I feel like well, if I lose them, I'm screwed because they don't want to go in and do the work. So they just keep overpaying as opposed to showing up and training. I actually just had this conversation with a former employee of mine. They're like, I need X amount of dollars. I was like, cool, I'll fire you in 3 days. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, my expectation, if I'm going to pay you at a premium, you can't meet that. Like, I'm not being rude, but you can't. You haven't worked for me in 4 years. You're not going to be able to meet that expectation like in a week. And I was like, you can make that in a month if you start a little bit lower and you work to it.
Yep.
It's like we pay hourly, we don't pay salary for any of our managers, so we pay overtime. I was like, you can average that with your overtime, you can blow past that with your bonuses. But I was like, if you want that to start, it's going to be hard. It's like it's your choice, like how you want to, approach it. And they're
Sure.
like, I knew we were going to have this conversation.
Doesn't make it an easy conversation to have.
Yeah,
But
we've learned when we overpay, it never works. Like we have this threshold where it's like, I'll give it to you, and we have this sheet. It's like, cool, but you're gonna have to learn this in a week. And they're like, what? Like, hey, you just told me you're amazing and you're the greatest of all time. We have 15-year-olds that can learn this in 3 weeks. So if you're the greatest of all time, you can learn this in a week.
that,
And they're like, well, that's hard. Like, well, that's,
Mhm.
you just said you're amazing. So
Yep.
like sometimes you just have to be able to, and honestly, man, growing homegrown talent, not only is it more efficient, but uh, I'd rather pay the person that same dollar amount after 3 months of them earning it, because they're gonna feel like they earned it versus them feeling like they just got it because they showed up. I don't mind paying somebody. It's a different approach.
Yeah, definitely something that you might not think about going into it, which is why I wanted you to elaborate on that a little bit. Just another hidden investment, actually, not really a hidden cost, but you're investing in your people and investing in the future of your stores. Um, so Art, you've actually you have sort of a different experience. You've primarily developed most of your units, I think, except for one. And so I'm sure that has a totally different set of challenges when thinking about the human part of it that we just talked about and managing people. How did you make sure to start off on the right foot in terms of building a sustainable culture? And once you build it, how do you make sure it carries on to each additional unit consistently?
Yeah. So one of the things, we've learned is culture is at the top of our pyramid. It's above sales. And with our first location and now with our fourth, we're continuing, we meet with every team member and we really get to know them. We get to know them, kind of what Charles is saying. It's beyond just the pay, but really, who are they? Where are they going? What are their goals? How can we support them in their goals? For as owners, the business is the most important thing. And we have to make sure we're reminding ourselves that we work for them. We work for our team. We're there for them, not the opposite. So for us, culture, we instill it in everything we do. It's not just a phrase. We have two pillars that we've built our culture on. And in the first store, my wife and I were both hyper focused. One pillar is called Raving Fans. It actually comes from a book written by Ken Blanchard called Raving Fans. And then the second is family and unity, making sure that we're treating internally each other like family. Same core values that we would all expect. And we've carried that forward now with the 4 locations by the homegrown approach, as Charles said too. Because we were hyper focused on that early on, that has now carried forward. So our leadership team carries that on as well. But we're there to work for them to make sure that culture stays at the top above sales.
Got it. So really
It's,
just making it second nature. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Sam, actually an interesting question popped up here that we probably won't get into, but because we're kind of beyond the question. So it's an interesting question that I thought it'd be good for both Charles and Art to address. But the question is what was the motivation behind transitioning to franchising, period? Aside from where you are today, why did you decide to get into it?
Yeah,
Mine's pretty short. I don't think anyone's going to work harder than me, and I don't trust anyone to care about my paycheck.
Short and
Yeah,
sweet.
I like it. Yeah. And
I mean,
I just want
I
to,
grew up in Detroit. I was like 18 to 22 when the last auto industry collapse kind of happened, and that's where I grew up. And I was working for Jimmy John's at the time as a GM, and I remember having to deal with all that chaos. And when I was like thinking of something to get into, I already knew the brand. I had a decent amount of connections at the brand, like because it was only about 300 units when I started. So I was like, man, I know this like the back of my hand. Like I know it. Like I always joke. I was like, Jordan had a fadeaway. For some reason, I can make sandwiches. Like, and I know it's kind of egotistical, but I mean, like I can do this like with my eyes closed. Like, and I've trained people a ton, and it's like, I don't know, it was an easy decision for me. I'd rather be beyond stressed and lose sleep over stuff for myself than lose sleep over something that I have no control over.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll just add on to that. So a couple of influences for us. One was realizing it was less risk to actually go out on my own than to continue in the corporate world. It was less risk, but boy, that was hard to really understand. That was one. And then two, my wife and I have always had an entrepreneurial drive, and my mom was really an inspiration for a path of franchising because she was the right hand to a franchisee who opened 20 locations in the Great Clips concept. And so we watched firsthand how she was just going about her way, and a couple of years later, boom, there's 20 locations open. So that really opened our eyes to franchising as a path to jump into the entrepreneurial space. And so franchising, yeah, that's how we got into it. And one other highlight, I just want to, Charles has said it a couple of times, it's a lot of work. So
Yeah, but I mean, I'll be honest, I love it. Like on my worst day, I'm still happy. Like,
yeah,
like I've had employees just say, "How's your day going?" I'm like, "You don't want to know." And I'm like, and I don't mean it rudely. I was like, when I was in your shoes, I didn't care what the owner was like. I was like, here's a better question. Just ask me on a scale of 1 to 10, how's my day? And then I'll ask you about your day and see if I can help you. And they're like, I'm okay with that. So like I tell my managers and my staff, I was like,
yeah.
you can ask, like just I'm okay with that. Like, and I don't think it's rude. I'm like, so we just try to have those kind of moments. But like I went back through my life and started to realize there was actually these little moments going all the way back to my childhood. I was like, oh, I've kind of always thought this way. Like I remember where there was Pepsi points. We didn't drink pop when I was a kid because we were kind of broke. But I would go around the neighborhood, go through like recycling bins and take bottle caps and just go then take and get points. I'm like, oh man, I guess I've always done this kind of stuff. Like, I don't know, like you, as guess as you get older, you realize like, oh, maybe I've always kind of thought that way, And that's why I always tell like whether it's my kids or other kids when they say I feel like I see things different or I'm never part of a group, but I'm like, that's not a bad thing. Like you just haven't found your niche yet. So like you'll get there. Just keep thinking that way, keep learning, and you'll find the right thing. Like, and the kind of the beauty of franchising is it allows you to go out on your own with a little bit of a safety net.
Mhm.
You just have to find the right one that fits you, right? Like you're still on your own, but you do have some support, right? You got to make sure you're not the person who's going to argue about everything because like we all see it. If you're, I'm sure if there's like a chat or a group, there's always those people who are like, well, we should do this. We should be, man, if you want to be that creative, why'd you get in a franchise? Like, right. Like the whole point of it was you wanted them to see that sign that they've seen in other cities and they can trust it. They trust it because there's an expectation. If you change
Yeah.
too much, they're not going to trust it. And that comes with giving a little, and you have some of that giving means you don't have as much creativity.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
analogy that I've heard over and over that really resonates for that, what Charles is describing, is the paint by number analogy. Franchising is really a paint by number. Here are the paints, here's the type of paints, here are the brushes, this is the canvas. And as long as you're comfortable painting within those lines, you're good. But if you're the type that's like, I don't like these paints, I want a new brush, this canvas is ridiculous, franchising, you may want to slow down.
It's going to be tough.
Or find a small enough franchise that you feel like you can grow and then have cool conversations that maybe help shape, not aggressively,
Yes.
but just
Yeah.
help shape. Like,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I can't count how many conversations over the years I've had with Jimmy John's. I can give a real quick one. Before Sarah Meath left, when she got promoted, she sent me this thing where we're changing documents in the store, the old punch list, and I was like writing on a PDF. I was swearing all over it, and I was like, "Are you effing kidding me? I'm like, come on, Sarah, you're better than this. You're just stupid." And we've had this relationship forever. And I'm in a store with like my regional like business coach, and he's dying. And I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "She just sent this to the whole company." And at the top it goes, "Haven't seen this much swearing on a document since Jimmy sold the company." But she's like, "Charles is right. We need to rethink this." And I was like, "Oh, snap." I was like, I got blasted, but like at least I got praised at the same time. So like if you're willing to like put yourself out there, but also understand there's going to be a cost, you can make a change in a franchise. You just have to know it's going to, like government, it's going to come in small changes. and you just got to put the work in and just, take your time. But you get that trust and you get that model. I've always enjoyed it. And even there's things I haven't understood and they've worked out. So it's like, that's a cool thing too, to also witness, be like, man, I don't think this is good. I was wrong. I mean, I can count plenty of times that's happened. So that's the beauty of the model. You got to trust smart people.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thanks, guys. That was a great question. Whoever asked it. It disappeared from the screen, but thank you for that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about managing people, and in that side of opening new units and growing. So let's dive into financing a little bit. I think for existing operators on the call, and for you guys probably looking for financing right now, a lot of people can probably relate to challenges with lending due to decreasing trends, right? Maybe not on the top line, but definitely on the bottom line. So from higher labor costs and just rising costs in general. What have you had to do to either counteract some of those things or help lenders get comfortable with what that looks like and explaining those things to them in this environment? I guess. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So for us, it's beyond the paycheck, but it goes back to the culture. And really, we try to have quarterly offsite fun activities. We try to invest in those, get people together. We show appreciation across the board to our team members. We celebrate every win, small and big. We really try to, again, keep that culture at the top. We show that we value them, and that's beyond just the paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
For lenders, sharing the vision, I like what Charles said, sitting down and having conversation, sharing the vision of who you are, where you're wanting to go, being an open book, transparent. I had several conversations with Travis and from ApplePie before we even talked really lending. And it was for him to understand who we were and for me to try to get educated on how franchise lending works. So really about the relationship with the lender is how we went about it, getting really to share who you are, understand what you're trying to do.
Makes sense. What about for you, Charles? Anything to add?
You got to shake babies and kiss hands. No, I'm just kidding. It's the old adage. You have to be political a little bit, meaning you have to talk to people. You can't only show up when you need money. You have to build relationships. You have to communicate. You have to, if you have a loan officer, if you have a sales agent, even if it's a local bank, if it's ApplePie, no matter who you're dealing with, you have to constantly be in communication with people and tell them and show them that you're not just coming to them once a year or once every 3 years. The more you talk to somebody, the more you build trust with them, the more they know what's going on. I mean, I'm Facebook friend, and I use social media for that tool. I'm not building an audience like I'm trying to gain followers. My audience I build is the people I want to see what I'm doing, right? So that they know, like, oh, he's at a store at 5 a.m. on a Sunday. Like, I trust that if there's an issue, he's going to take care of it, right? He's doing accounting at 7 p.m. on a Saturday. He's not going to be like, oh, it doesn't matter, right? I can't count how many times I've worked with Lai or Maria and some of the other like closing specialists who are like, oh, we're so happy to have you. You're so amazing with your time. You get stuff to us before we even need it, asking important questions. Like, that's the stuff that goes way beyond just helping your relationships. It's being respectful, right? So it's like, if you're going to your lender and you're like, oh, I don't have my books done, or I don't have this, or I don't have that, or what, man, you got to be educated from day one. First of all, you have to have your ducks in a row consistently, because if not, you really aren't going to grow. You're not going to have, your money, the money you need. That was one of the things that actually was hard in the beginning. Everyone was like, wait, you do your accounting every week? Yeah. It was like, and you have an accountant who also does it on top of it once a month? Yeah. So why do you do your books twice? And I was like, because I want to make sure that we're not missing anything. Jimmy John's likes it one way, but I also want my, accrual one for the taxes. And they're like, you're nuts. I'm like, no, I get it. Like, I'm fully aware. Like, so we would do so many extra things that in the beginning, and my age at the time, I was like 34, I think, when I started. So 33, a lot of that worked against me. I didn't have this like big financial backing. I didn't have a bunch of assets. I had to pay a bunch of higher interest rates. But like Travis and I would talk and I would learn, okay, you're going to pay these points. This is why. And I remember the first time I talked to Denise, I think I told you this story when we went to go have coffee. One of the things we talked about, I joked was, I was like, oh, I've paid for your new office in San Francisco. And she's like, the fact that that doesn't bother you, that you understand that and you know your role and you know our role is why we love working with you. You don't get upset. You know like you're not like, well, how come they get that? They're like, you know that you don't have the assets other people have. You know where you're at in the game, and you're working through it, right? So you have to have good self-awareness, right? And ask questions, be like, okay, if I'm not there yet, how do I get there? What's the next step? Right. And you just got to keep kind of plugging along, right? Yeah, it would have been great to get SBAs. Yeah, it would have been great to have what I didn't. So I worked with ApplePie, who had different products, who talked to me. Like, I can't count how many times Travis was like, man, can you make it 4 months? Or do you need this right now? And I was like, if you're telling me I can save money, I can close a loan fast because I have my stuff in a row. Yeah, let's wait 4 months. Like, he's like, I think rates are going to go down. We'll have more options for you. Like, he would talk to me properly, right? So we had relationships. Relationships are huge. You know, during COVID and when everything got shut down, those relationships I had with ApplePie in the speed to have just communication, understanding of what was going on. Like, there was so many people were, it made all the difference in the world to just have people to talk to and work as a team to get out of things. I'm in restaurants, man. Being able to talk to your lender about where's your food cost, where has it been, what do you understand about your menu, what are your neighbors doing, what's your foot traffic like because of this, do you understand trends? If you can talk to them from an educated standpoint, they're going to be more willing to invest in you. If you're like, well, I don't know, and you're asking for like $1 million to invest in something, you're more likely not going to get it. Like, it's all about confidence, communication, and relationships.
So knowing your
The
business
same.
and then being prepared to explain it and show the lenders that you know it. Go ahead, Randy. Were you going to say
Yeah,
something?
I was just going to say, so there was a question here that I think what Charles and Art were just kind of touching on. The question is how does a franchisee determine that scaling their business is the best way to go? What metrics do they analyze to determine the scaling is the right decision for them? Number one, I mean, I think Art and Charles, and I'll let you guys answer this, but I think knowing your business, number one, is step one. Making sure you understand the key metrics, KPIs that you need to measure too. And even though you're all part of a brand, you as the owner are also, like Art talked specifically about culture. Like, he may have a KPI measurement that's outside of just the numbers. So it's making sure that you're set up from a financial perspective, understand the numbers, but also what other things are going to drive your business. You need to understand that, is my view on how you're going to scale the best. Going from 1 to 2 is different than 3 to 5, et cetera. So scaling is different depending on where you are in the life cycle of your business. So Art and Charles, why don't you go first, Art? But that's an interesting question. And how do you determine when is the right time?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And just to echo what you're saying, Randy, it started for us with my wife and I really sitting down and knowing, what do we want? Is it one location? Is it 2? Is it 20? Is it 200? And really not just, one conversation, but going really deep on what is our goal here. Then from there, making sure you're established both with the culture. We, again, hyper-focused in that first location, making sure you have a bench of leadership to step into locations, beyond one. And Randy, you're right. We actually do a monthly survey with all of our location, with all of our team members. And part of that is how we measure, is our culture alive and kicking, and where do we need to focus? And we ask every team member to complete that survey, and we get that feedback every month, and we take action on that feedback. It's not just to check the box. So those are the three things. We, set out our vision in the beginning. We hyper focused on culture, and then we made sure we had the right leadership team to expand. That's how we really came to those decisions on scaling.
Charles,
Would
anything
say
you want
if
to
you're
add?
in the I was gonna say if you're in the franchise model, talk to your franchise, see if there's somebody who's going through it. Understand the distance and the size of which you scale will make a difference. For me, I've done it the hard way. Oh yeah. Meaning doing it in 4 different cities is not the smartest thing, but I just took advantage of really good deals. Like if you can usually for a Jimmy John's, getting to 5 stores in one location makes all the difference. I have 3 in multiple cities. So having 11 is great, but having 11 in 2 cities would have been better. But for example, I got a market for $1, 3 stores for $1. You're like, oh my God, that's amazing. I had to spend $650,000 in the first 3 months just fixing stuff. That's why I got it for $1. So you have to understand when you're scaling, you're going to lose sales probably in some of your stores because you're going to pull some people out to expand. But you're also going to grow over time. For example, when I took over my Lubbock locations, my Amarillo market dipped for about 6 months, but then both of them grew as we got better. So like, yes, there is a little bit of a regression, but as you grow as a team, you come out of it. So it's just a matter of like, understanding, like in life, there's going to be that kind of, you can't grow forever, right? Like I love these people who do these projections and it's like a constant uphill. It's like, well, if you do that, you're going to lose customers. I remember helping this guy in Colorado and I was like, he's like, we're comping like crazy. Our sales are up. And I was like, the customer count has been down for 4 straight years. You're losing customers. You're gouging your ticket prices. And I walked him through like how to bring his pricing back, and he brought his prices back, increased his customer count, and then like he took off. And a lot of people just don't understand some of those metrics. So it's like talking to your franchise, talking to other franchisees, taking time to understand some of those metrics within your business, you know, makes a big difference. And in the world of analytics and the world of everything, sometimes you can get too buried, into some of the numbers, but you kind of have to find that sweet spot. It takes time, like anything. In the beginning, you couldn't walk, you couldn't feed yourself, and now look at, most of us are functioning pretty well. So like, it takes time, it takes reps. So I would say this: if you're thinking about scaling, you already know you want to. So the question is, and it takes a lot longer than you realize. Like construction doesn't go as quick as it used to. I built my downtown store in 23 days. It took me 6.5 months to build my Quaker location. I use the exact same contractor. Things are different. I would say start looking now because things are just different. Like stop waiting. Start the process early. The longer you wait, the longer it's going to take. Real estate, everything just takes longer than it used to. And don't be afraid to do small locations, man. Your customers, they love things looking full.
Yeah. And it
The
sounds
only
like
thing I
there's
would
not.
add.
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say you both answered it in sort of 2 different ways, but it's both important both of the points you made were important. One was that there's really no magic number, but being prepared for and knowing your business enough to know, like you said, Charles, when you scale, sometimes you are going to see some adverse sales or things that might trip you up for a little bit on your existing location. So being prepared for that, being prepared to explain that to a lender. And then your answer was more toward like the foundational infrastructure of your business, making sure you at least have a solid handle on that before you start trying to open one store every 3 to 6 months and you're trying to run before you walk. So it's good you guys both brought a different
Be
perspective.
aware of ADAs.
Yeah. Go ahead, Randy. Sorry to interrupt. Oh, you're on mute, Randy. You're good? Okay. I know Randy's having internet issues, so we'll move on, but I'm sure he'll come back later if he's got an important point. Okay, thanks for that question. I see a couple in there. We'll stop in a few minutes here. Maybe I want to get to one quick question for Charles and Art that I think is valuable, and then we'll try to answer some of the ones in the Q&A. I'll let you guys choose. I know you could probably think of several when we talk about war stories, like, you know, the worst thing you ever did, something that a huge mistake you made and what you learned from it. You probably have plenty of those to choose from that you haven't already mentioned. Or on the flip side, is there one thing that stands out that you're like, this is what I did, and it was a copy paste type thing, and it just made all of the difference? So Art, maybe you can go first and which side you want to talk about.
Sure, I'll hit both sides real quick. So biggest war story goes for the category of leasing. So leasing is complicated. It goes back to relationships, making sure you have a team around you of, you know, qualified attorneys that have worked on leases. The short version of the war story is one of our, or the top performing locations, which was actually #1 in the state at one point, had a clause in the lease that said, the anchor tenant has the right of way to expand. And I knew that going in. It was discussed during the lease. It was my, okay, yes, I'll take that risk. And for about 10 years, that anchor tenant said, no, we're not going to exercise our right of way. Well, they did, and we had to close that location, extract it from its current spot, put it into storage, shut down, and then find a new location. So big war story. The takeaways, there's a lot of takeaways, but for our webinar today, the takeaway is, if there is a clause in the lease that is itching at you, that you think, hey, maybe, don't stop until you have wrapped everything around that clause that protects you, because it could happen. If it's in there, it could happen. The two, I'll give you two more on the other side of it. Good decisions. Franchising is a large industry. Once you get inside, it's actually pretty small, but there are a lot of franchise concepts out there. One of the smart decisions that we made along the way was getting connected with a franchise broker and understanding from them what is the market out there. We lucked into getting a really top-notch broker who took us through a whole process. So that's one. And then the second is getting in the right rooms. So, you know, again, it's a people business. So jump into franchise masterminds, find a crowd of people that are ahead of you, learn from them. We did that. It was really a great decision. And leverage your franchisor and your franchise network. The whole basis for franchising is based on the franchisees and the system. Learn from them. Don't come in saying, I think I know it all. Get into the rooms where the people there you look up to who are ahead of you are there, and learn from them. My wife and I, we have learned so much from being in the right rooms.
Yeah, it's truly a community.
Yes, Sam, actually, it's a perfect segue into a couple questions that popped up and what I wanted to say before my internet went out. What Art just touched on is what I was going to add. You know, like scaling, et cetera, was for when I previously was going to chime in. You know, having the right mentor to help you along through the scaling is really important. And it could be somebody within your franchise concept. It could be the franchisor itself or somebody else that you admire, which kind of touches on another question that was asked. And I don't know, I think both you and Charles had offered in our prep call for this. Somebody had asked if we'd be able to share your contact information with them. I'm speculating they're looking for some type of mentor to help with that. So I know you guys had offered that up, and I think we could figure out how to share that
Oh
after
yeah,
this is over.
mine's. You can actually find mine if you Google my name. So many press releases from books over the years. Like it's not hard. Yeah, that's fine. If anybody wants to get in contact with me, Randy, you can give them my email address. No problem. So,
Likewise,
then,
Randy, happy to help.
Yeah, perfect. Sorry. And then this kind of your whole question or your whole response to this actually was a good segue for some of these questions that have been building up. So the question is that I can answer is can I ask who is the broker, or better said, now that I'm rereading this, I probably don't know the answer, but there was a person that wanted to ask who the broker was. Art, I'm not sure if you're comfortable answering that or not, but I thought the original question is who is a broker, period? What were they asking? So I'll answer that. The broker is the franchise broker, somebody that kind of helps navigate you through the franchise journey of trying to select what brand suits you, both financially, but also personally, and matches you with kind of, in theory, the best fit for you. So I think, Art, if you're comfortable sharing who the broker was, the person that asked the question just wrote back, she clarified the question.
Yeah, no, great. Happy to share. And if anyone needs any help, Randy, happy to help. That's what it's all about, paying it forward. So my broker, her name's Kimberly Daly. And I'll just give a quick backstory. Again, relationships. I was pounding the pavement trying to get in touch with different franchisors, and I bumped into a guy through LinkedIn who was in a franchise. He offered to call me. We had a quick call, and he explained to me this concept of franchise brokers. I was so unaware of the franchise industry at the time, I didn't even know there was a such thing as a franchise broker. So through that conversation, he introduced me to Kimberly Daly. And Kimberly Daly turned out, she's like one of the top 3 brokers in the nation, but it wasn't my doing. It was dumb luck and just persistence and networking. Happy to make any introductions there that I can do, but that was the broker. And she took us through a process that was so well organized, and it really helped us collect our thoughts, define our vision, what are our goals, as opposed to just, throwing a dart out there at a brand that we thought was good, right? So yeah, get a broker.
Thanks, Art. Charles, there's actually, there's a couple of questions. I'll let you choose between what's the best and worst decision, or someone else asked, what's your end game? That's another good one that we touched on in the previous one that people were interested in. So I'm not sure which one you feel like answering.
well, I'd say it is sometimes hard to, I guess, sell a franchise. A lot of people be like, well, how do you sell? Because especially someone who's buying them on the cheap. So my end game is to essentially slowly sell my markets to people in my area managers, my leaders in my markets, and then allow them with that ownership they've built up to get loans to buy more ownership. So I'm essentially creating my own buyers. So that's kind of my end game. Do I want to pass it off to my kids? I don't think they want to run my business. If they want to, cool. But that way, by the time they become of age, they have partners in each market and they don't have to work like I've had to. You know what I mean? They'd have a different kind of life than I do. I want them to find their own path. So that's kind of like my end game, is to essentially find my own, give people the opportunity I didn't have, right? The way I got into this was a lot of things had to fall my way, and it did, and I pulled it off, and it was a lot of hard work, but I got there and I'm growing it. Best and worst decisions. It's easy. The best and worst decision I ever did was buy the Santa Fe market. I did it on a seller finance deal. I was helping the guy out. I remember having this conversation with my accountant. I had just literally built the downtown store. The bank was really mad at me for doing it because I was growing too fast in their eyes. This is before I got to ApplePie, and it was a local bank, and they're like, well, we may not even help you finish paying off the new store you just built. and Randy and I were talking, and Travis got involved, and it was still kind of all up in the air. And Travis was swamped. He's like, "I'll get back to you in like a little bit. Let me know what happens with your bank." And my bank was like, "Well, we'll let you know. We're at this point just operate like we're not going to get you a loan." So I, at this point, still owed a contract of about the last 150,000 on a $400,000 project, and I was paying him monthly, and I'd known the guy, so he was letting me deal with, kind of work through it. And I was like, "Hey, I got this opportunity to buy the Santa Fe market on a seller finance deal, but if I do, I can't get a bank loan to finish paying you off." And the contractor's like, "Just do it, man." He's like, "You're already paying me monthly. You answer my call every, whenever." He's like, "I'm going to make more money off you long term anyways. I'm not worried about it." Okay. We get into Santa Fe, get one store for free, take over another store that's pretty high volume. It's doing really good, but it's been a pain in the butt since day one. Mexico and Santa Fe are just, it's a different town. But because of that market, met Travis. I was able to refinance that market 9 months later, which ended up allowing me to pay everything off. And then I remember him saying, "Hey, do you want to build another store in that market for Amarillo when we refinance all this? Now that you've got 5 stores." And my crazy self goes, "What about buying another market?" And we bought Lubbock. Had I not done that though, I wouldn't have survived COVID, because my slide location was doing like $60,000 a week during COVID when most of my stores were doing 10. So best decision, worst decision ever.
Sometimes that's how it works. Do you have anything to add on, or have you, I'm sure you've given thought to it when it comes to your end game? Do you have a ceiling, or do you have an exit plan sort of in the future cashed out?
For me, Sam?
Yes, for you.
Yeah. Yeah, so right now, short term, we're finishing out our 6 locations. Beyond that, similar to Charles, it's not really, for the kids, same story there. But one day we'll probably end up selling our locations. Right now in the short term, though, it's about building out these 6 and hyper focused on that.
Sure. Makes sense.
Tim, I'll build on that for 1 second, because there's a couple questions that popped up, but in the context of the question that we're having, I'm going to pivot a little bit to financing, but also the end game in mind, right? So if you're looking to grow through financing, if you're not sitting on a mountain of cash, and or you're looking to sell at some point, the advice that I would give everybody is don't fall in the trap of trying to write off your kids' cars, your mom's car, your cell phone bill under your tax returns. Show that you're making money. It's going to help you grow faster. And also it'll help you sell at a higher multiple of EBITDA. If somebody has to do gymnastics to try to understand your cash flow, whether it's a bank and or a buyer, you're going to get less bang for the buck. It's great to take advantage of tax situations, depreciation, amortization, et cetera, all standard. Once you're at a point where you think you're not going to grow anymore and your accountant gives you some tips to write off certain things and you don't want to sell within 3 years, start taking advantage of certain things you can as a business owner. But if you're preparing to sell, or if you're trying to grow, show as much money as you can on your taxes and support that with clean profit and loss statements.
Yeah.
I've seen it when I buy locations, Randy. I'll double that. Where like, I remember when we even took over El Paso, they didn't have P&Ls, like, period. Like, that was part of the issue. They had a group that was like somebody operating it, somebody financing it, and they were just getting sick and tired of the person running it not holding up their end of the bargain. And I'm like, it's not that hard to do books. Like, there's just not that many transactions in a Jimmy John's. You know what I mean? There just isn't.
Right.
And I was trying to help them like generate this stuff, showing them how even like QuickBooks Online, you can auto import it, teach it a couple of rules. Like, it's not perfect, but you can still generate stuff. And they had nothing. And I'm like, you have no, like, how are you surviving? Like, if you have zero, and I'm sure Randy's seen this over the years. Like it happens a lot. We're like, or I get these accountant companies that call me like, "Hey, we'd love to be," and I'm like, "Dude, I'm doing more than you offer out. Like, I'm not your client. Like, the person you want is like, I have money in the bank. You know what I mean? Like, if you need to know what your transactions are, you need to know, like, at the end of the day, you can't expect someone else to care about your bank account or your business as much as you. And you can't get mad about it. That Gary V thing, right? You can't get mad that this kid who works for you doesn't care as much as you. It's your job to empower them to care about everything as a whole. So, like, that's why we share our P&Ls, which is a Jimmy John's thing. I share with my guys every 4 weeks. I'll be working on my stuff. Our period just ended. Those things matter, man. Like knowing where your stuff, I can't count how many small errors I've found over the years. Electric bills that aren't getting calculated right. Because I'm looking at last year's stuff. I'm like, wait a minute, they're not doing readings again. I call the city. Hey, man, you haven't done a reading. Oh, wait, look, my bill next month just went down 60%. Like, man, that stuff matters. Like, yeah. And, as much as I love my accountant, I'm only one of his clients. He's not going to notice, those little things that I'm going to notice. And I don't expect him to.
Definitely.
Yeah, Sam, do you want me to there's a couple questions that could take us a few different ways. Did you have some more questions before I ask these, or did you want to finish up here? Because there's pretty interesting questions.
No, I'm good with my agenda because these people are keeping us busy with their questions. I think there's some good ones. So go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to tackle one of them because it's pretty short answer, and then I'd like to pose one to Art and Charles. I think they both kind of touched on it already, but I'll restate it. So the question is curious, approximately what size EBITDA to lending partners and buyers rely more on P&L for lending versus tax returns? So I think that's asking two questions really in one. So I'll address the EBITDA first. So, I think the question is from a buyer's perspective and or seller's perspective, what's a reasonable multiple of EBITDA to expect to either borrow against and or sell for? Honestly, there's a lot of factors that go in on that. On the lending side, I'll speak to ours. We lend up to 4.5 times EBITDA. So if you're making 200 grand in EBITDA, we'll lend 900,000 is what that means. From a purchase price, there's a lot of factors that go into that. Underperforming store versus performing very well. There's also, if you're selling 10 locations at one time versus selling one location at a time, contiguous markets seem to sell for a higher multiple of EBITDA than a one-off location. So there's a ton of factors that go into
Is there real estate involved?
Yeah, right. So as a general rule of thumb, and it also depends on the brand and the industry. And so there's a lot of factors that go into what a buyer and seller should sell for. My best answer to that is whatever the buyer's willing to pay and whatever the seller's willing to get rid of. General rule of thumb is 4 times EBITDA for a one-off transaction, one-off store. And I've seen larger franchisees with 20 units in a contiguous market sell for 10 times EBITDA. So it really kind of depends on the situation on that.
And it's how quick you want out. If you're just in the moment, I don't want to cut in, but just like if you're like, I want out, you're not going to get a return. If you're like, I'm open to offers and you're continually growing your business, you might find a really good offer from somebody who eventually finds, just like selling your house. If you're in a hurry, you're not going to get the right offer. If you're continually growing your business and you're looking for the right offer, you might find somebody who eventually you might find the right person at the right time, but it'll take time. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. The timing with these things is everything.
Yeah. And then I think in the spirit of this conversation that we're having here, I think this is a fitting question to ask is, For your first location, I think is what they were referring to. I don't think they asked it this way, but I'm going to state it this way. Would you recommend being an owner operator or hiring a manager to take over operations? I'll start with Art there, and then you can transition to Charles.
Yeah, so I think, so I'll give you my experience with it. The general experience is it goes back to the vision and goals of really what do you want, you know, because there's a model for both in the franchising space. In our goals, we did not want to be the operator. We wanted to hire the team and be able to support that team. But again, it comes back down to what are your goals for jumping into franchising. And that's also a great thing that brokers can walk you through. There's a term out there, semi-absentee. There's not enough time left in the webinar for my take on that, but be careful when you hear semi-absentee.
Like I said,
That's why I thought this was an important question to ask.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like in
go
our
ahead,
preview,
Charles.
I was like, if you're not willing to show up one day and get stuck running your business for a month, I don't know if you should invest in it, right? Like, in my experience, not only in Jimmy John's but other brands, I helped in my in-between time from working for a franchisee and becoming one when I was consulting. Almost every brand that I've seen that has operating partners, it rarely worked out because the person who was the operating partner, I rarely have ever brought money into it. And even the ones that didn't bring in the same amount. So there was always an imbalance. When you have that big of an imbalance, there's resentment eventually. Well, you're just sitting and doing this and you don't understand what I'm going through. And someone's like, yeah, but I gifted you ownership. You ain't like, so there's always, that's what leads to the issue, right? Now it's different if after like 5 to 10 years of service, you give somebody some ownership for the work to get. It's similar to like my earlier statement about overpaying somebody day one versus giving them like a larger market value because of the work they did, right? So it's that earned ownership versus gifted ownership. Not saying the model can't work if it's earned, but if it's gifted out the gate, it rarely works. I've almost never seen it work long term, because there's the imbalance of it all. Because of it usually leads to that constant imbalance. And at the end of the day, if they were that good, why aren't they doing it on their own? And I don't mean that in a rude way. I mean, like, why didn't they try to find an investor or find, right? Like a lot of us have done that are on our own. So that's kind of like, it's just a weird conversation to have. So like the operating partner it's a really hard conversation to have. Again, at the end of the day, it's about balance. And that situation usually leads to something bad on the back end.
Yeah, agreed. Listen, we've got, we're at time, but we have a lot of really great questions still. I think, Judah, we have we can send these answers to you. I think we've got all the registrants' information, so we can answer these just individually after the webinar, if that's good with everybody. I think we could extend this for another hour probably, but that's why we do multiple series of questions.
I warned you when we did that pre-interview. I was like, I ain't talk for hours.
I didn't have any like Oscar music to cue. So you were pretty good. I think you did great.
Air horn.
That would have been more effective probably, but I don't have that either.
I got one thing to add here. If the person who asked if we had a recommendation for a GC in Charleston, South Carolina, Art mentioned that he or she can email him directly and he'll give some recommendations.
Perfect. Thanks, Art. So this was a great conversation. Art and Charles, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll be in touch soon, but this was, I know you're both busy, as we all heard, so thanks for taking time out of your day, and for everybody on the call, thanks for doing the same. We appreciate you joining us and being so engaged this whole time. It was a really good use of everybody's time. like I said, we'll send this recording out, so stay tuned for that in the next couple of days. And hopefully we'll host another one of these in the coming months. So look out for that as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you.